Well, hello, folks, and welcome once again to FlockTalk. Let's get right into it. This question is: what are your favorite fiction books and why? We'll definitely address this question. I can't address them all, but some of my more favorites and maybe one or two of my not so favorites I will address. The first one I want to mention is Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe. Daniel Defoe definitely had Puritan influences. It's a fiction book about a man who is marooned on an island by himself, and he has the goods of the ship to sustain him, things like barrels and rope and axe heads and so forth, but everything else is gone. And he reflects on his situation and is first angry that he is left alone on the island. And then he considers it and compares himself to all the men who died on the ship. It's an excellent book, or it's an excellent story about the goodness and grace of God. And it also has a section in it whereby there's a lot of, shall we say, dilemmas here, ethical dilemmas that Robinson has to work through, especially when he realizes that cannibals are using his island for their nefarious purposes. It is also a great economics book because Robinson does not carry coins off the ship because it won't do him any good on the island. Instead, he carries those items off the ship that will give him options. In other words, the coins will not give him options. Options is another name for wealth, actually. When you have wealth, you have options, and when you don't have options, you don't have wealth, no matter how many coins you have. This is really brought out very well in Robinson Crusoe. A lot more we could say about that. Also, Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. Robert Louis Stevenson wrote a lot. He actually wrote on the Scottish wars with there in Scotland with the basically with Rome, if you will. But the book Treasure Island is probably Robert Louis Stevenson's most well-known work, and I have appreciated it because it presents a very duplicitous, if you will, bad guy, antagonist, who is smart enough to come off as a good guy and is able to go from good to bad to good to bad, but ultimately he's not a good person. And it does a really good job at presenting this type of a person. I really like Treasure Island. It's well told and well done. By the way, if you ever want to see a good movie, if you can get a hold of it, watch the movie Treasure Island that stars in it Charlton Heston as Long John Silver. All the other movies that I've ever seen trying to make Treasure Island into a movie, they go from bad to terrible. Charlton Heston in Treasure Island is by far the best. You will be completely entertained. And one of the things I like about it is the fact that when the antagonist gets himself in a lot of trouble, he goes to the authorities on the island, if you will, and asks to make a deal from the captain of the ship. And the captain of the ship says, "Yeah, I'll make you a deal. I will give you a fair trial back in England." That's the only deal you get. Pretty good words. All right. Um, Pretty much anything by Frank Peretti I've enjoyed. This Present Darkness. He has Frank Peretti in his books. I think his the other book, The Prophet. He's got some kids' books as well. One of his kids' books is extremely well titled, "Escape from the Island of Aquarius." That's an excellent title. But two books especially, The Prophet and This Present Darkness, they're good. They're good works in exploring how evil people work, and very entertaining at the same time. Evil people, the excuses that they make, the justifications that they make, it's very good for those things, and I enjoyed those works. I just finished up a day or two ago for the second time by Bram Stoker the book Dracula. Now, don't get too excited or upset at me here. Don't confuse the book Dracula with the movies. The movies don't get it at all. They just make a horror story. The book itself, though, by Bram Stoker, is something I recommend. Here's what it does. It points out how that when you get caught up in evil, it's not just you yourself. All the people that love you, all the people that are concerned about you will have to spend their time, their energy, oftentimes their money trying to help you because they love you. This idea that, well, I'm going to go do my own thing, and if I fall into a ditch, it's just me. That's not true. The people that love you will act. And if you decide to disobey God and His word, you will be not only destroying yourself, but you will be taking up the energies of those who are concerned about you. And the book Dracula, I believe, makes that point more clear than any other book I've ever read. Think, for example, of those who commit suicide, an extremely selfish act. Um, the guilt that's left over, not to mention even the physical mess to clean up. For example, if someone makes a mess when they kill themselves, which often happens. But those who are left feel all kinds of guilt, all kinds of shame, all kinds of pain. And a person might say, well, I just killed myself. It's only, and I've heard this, well, it's my life. It's my business. No, it's not just your business. The book Dracula makes the case. It's really good. The Lord of the Rings fantasies, that struggle between good and evil. I really like the Lord of the Rings fantasy, especially over the ring. The ring represents man's evil, wicked nature, and to get rid of it is just nearly impossible. And of course, we live in a time when a person can, change their ways and make themselves better on their own and so forth. People believe that. The Lord of the Rings trilogy makes the opposite case. That man's evil and wicked nature, his desire to be powerful, and then that desire to use that power for wicked ends, as we see with the character Gollum, for example. Um, it's great study on human nature, which is what good fiction is supposed to be, right? Good fiction is supposed to be a study on human nature. More on that in a minute because I'm going to talk about a movie or two as well. Chronicles of Narnia. The storytelling is terrific, and I mentioned Chronicles of Narnia in part because my all-time favorite fiction fairy tale, and I am a fan of fairy tales, and I hate to see them messed with. I hate to see them rewritten by modern people who want to make things nicer. But my all-time favorite fairy tale ever written is The Silver Chair, which is part of the Chronicles of Narnia series. That's my all-time favorite. I should actually read that again. And talking about fairy tales here. For example, I believe it's Hans Christian Andersen who wrote The Emperor's New Clothes. That, again, fairy tales exist for a reason. They are there to teach us truths, timeless truths, if you will, and they survive for a reason. Not all of them are the same. I believe not all of them teach the same truths. Not all of them teach truth necessarily, but many of them do. And some of them have become my favorites over the years. For example, I believe it was also Hans Christian Andersen who wrote The Steadfast Tin Soldier. Just a terrific little story about a tin soldier in the story who just did his job. It's, for me to this day, it's almost a tearjerker. I know it's just a fairy tale. That's all it is. But in that story, he was a steadfast tin soldier who did his job. And for a little fairy tale, it's absolutely inspiring. I hope you get a chance to read it in its more original form. I'm pretty sure that was also Hans Christian Andersen. There are other fairy tales as well. Many of the Grimm's fairy tales are excellent. And one of my all-time favorites, again, is Little Red Riding Hood. Now, the modern people want to make, the what do you call them? The woodsman. You might remember the wolf eats up the grandmother, and the woodsman comes and kills the wolf. And I think the modern Modern versions are, the woodsman comes and like puts the wolf back out into the wild or whatever. Nonsense, foolish, foolishness. Um, Stay away from the modern rewrites of fairy tales. But I am a fan of many of the fairy tales. Um, Anything by G.A. Henty. G.A. Henty wrote for an audience of young boys, an inspiring writer. His writing, in fact, one of the British prime ministers, I can't remember which one it was, basically said, "Don't worry about studying English history so much. Just read G.A. Henty, who wrote scores of novels, historical novels. I think, well, not I think, he did write one called With Lee in Virginia. He also wrote one about the fall of the temple in 70 AD. Probably my all-time favorite one was called In the Reign of Terror, where he has a young boy growing up in the French Revolution, in the Reign of Terror. And to read that book is to feel the terror of the French Revolution. Anything by G.A. Henty for me is profitable. These are historical novels, and he has a young boy growing up in the middle of this historical event. Excellent stuff like General Gordon, for example. Dash to Khartoum is very good. General Gordon was a British general who fought slavery, fought against the institution of slavery in the country of present day Sudan, paid for it with his life. Very good, godly man was General Gordon, and the G.A. Henty book Dash for Khartoum that's the name of the book, Dash for Khartoum, will definitely give you an idea of what it's like. The thing I love about Henty is he's got the fiction part, but the nice thing is you can easily separate the fiction from the historical fact in his books. A couple of books I didn't like as much. Some of them popular fiction. I didn't like The Count of Monte Cristo. It was good. It was good story writing, but I think the teaching, the moral of the story, is not good at all because it has a man exacting personal vengeance, horrific personal vengeance, and everything or almost everything pretty much works out. I think that is not the way it works out at all. Especially we as Christians, there are certain things we are not to take personal vengeance on. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. And I believe we see, especially in the Psalms, we see an appeal for vengeance. But that appeal is to God for vengeance. And in the end, God is going to be a much better he's going to be much better at exacting vengeance than we are. So I don't like the moral of that story, even though it's very well told. Another book that I just seriously it's a classic. A lot of people like it. I really disliked it then. I dislike it now. That's The Scarlet Letter. I believe that book was written specifically to attack Puritan New England and to normalize adultery, quite frankly. Some of my friends will disagree with me on that, even vehemently, but that is a book that I just dislike. I want to mention a couple of movies. One of them this is an older movie, and it's pretty scary for younger people, but it had an effect on the way I think about how evil people work. And that movie is an adaptation from a Ray Bradbury novel called Something Wicked This Way Comes. Something Wicked This Way Comes is the name of the movie. It's a little scary at times, but it gives great insight, I believe, into how evil people work. And again, this, I think, is the power of fiction, well-written fiction. It gives us insights into human nature. Pretty much everything I've mentioned so far, at least of the stuff I like anyway, I trust gives us insight into human nature. How do people really act? How do they act if they think that nobody is going to know what they're actually doing or what they're actually up to? In the darkness of their own counsel, as they war against God and war against their neighbor, what will they do? Another movie, it's a dark movie that I highly recommend. It's dark because it explores human nature. And that is a movie called A Simple Plan. The idea is that a bunch of money is found out, or is found by people living in flyover country, the Midwest, as I recall, and all of a sudden they find all this money, and the results of that. I won't say anymore. There's a lot more I could say about movies, but this was ultimately about books, about fiction books. And I've tried to give you an idea of what I like and what I found profitable. And I hope at least some of these you'll find profitable as well. There's many others that I've read, but these are the ones that come to mind. And I hope this has been helpful. And I want to thank whoever it was that dropped this question.